All right, welcome in to the live stream. We're back going live once again to the 60 feet 6 inches LSU pod. I have one special guest right now. The other one is on the way. He has left Alec Box Stadium, so he's probably fighting a little bit of traffic. But let me first introduce my buddy, my teammate, the winner of the 1996 National Championship game and the starter in the 1997 National Championship game, my guy, Patrick Coogan. Coog, what's up, brother? Thank you for joining the podcast, man.
Good move. Finally, happy to be a part of this. Man, what you've been doing has been great, and I'm so happy to join you guys and talk about the Tigers, man. It's something special that's happening this year, and I'm ready to help talk about it today.
No doubt. It's and this is a tight one, right? I mean,
Yeah,
that sucker lasted forever. Obviously, they had some unfortunate incidents in the Sunday game with some injuries and whatnot, and then just a lot of I think people holding their breath at the end. And obviously, you're a busy guy, busy schedule, so happy to finally have you on. We'll be joined by at some point Matthew Musso, and y'all know Musso. Coogan has joined Musso on a couple of his podcasts this year, but Musso's on 104.5 ESPN as he helps out Matt Moscona, and then he fills in for Moscona when he's out. But Musso also does the Musso at the Box podcast, which is released almost daily. And Musso does a great job breaking down baseball. So he'll be joining us. But Coog, just a 3,000-foot view on the weekend as a whole as LSU gets their second sweep in a row, coming off the sweep in Oxford as they put away a pesky. I don't even think pesky does Alabama justice. They're a good team.
they're a good
team.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what do you think about the weekend as a whole? When you take a step back.
Yeah, so it's a little bit of a coin toss there, right? Because anytime you get a sweep is a good weekend, right? But there were a lot of things that led you to have some concerns, and we'll get into that in a little while. But all in all, you sweep an SEC team, whether it's home or on the road, and you increase your lead in the Western Division. That's pause for to have just have some relevance and understand and awareness that you did sweep and you've increased your lead over the weekend.
Yeah, no doubt. And I know I'm sure you feel the same way, but we were kind of brought up at LSU 20-10, right? You always want to try to win 2 out of 3, home or away. You never want to get swept. If you can sweep, that's great. And like you said, Arkansas gets swept and they sweep again this weekend. South Carolina is trying not to get swept at home as we're talking right now. I don't know what Vanderbilt ended up doing, but like you said, anytime you can gain some ground, and when you look at the schedule, you got Auburn coming up, you have Mississippi State coming up who can hit, they can't pitch, and then you have Georgia who's a good team, right? And so, what? I guess let's start off with today's game. All right. Obviously, that one just ended. LSU wins 13-11. Man, it's a nail biter. And before we get into, just I guess some people's specific performance, just the ability for these guys to come back and they, get it done at home, a seesaw game. What do you think about the Tigers' performance today? Just kind of in a nutshell before we dive into specific players' performance.
Yeah, so anytime you go into a Sunday SEC game and with a taxed bullpen, right? And that's look, I've never seen a bullpen tax more in one day than what they did yesterday. And then you compound that with what happened on Friday. They were going to have some struggles if they don't get out of 4, 5, 6 innings with the starter. And of course, that's what happened with Christian Little, which is starting to become a little bit of an issue with LSU starting pitcher. Chris, if you go back and you look at the amount of innings that the starters pitched this weekend, they averaged 4 innings per ball game, right? They threw 12 starter innings this weekend, which isn't going to cut it very long, right? Like you've got to have Skenes go at least 6, which he did, right? He went 6, but then you get 2 2/3 and 2 1/3 on Saturday and Sunday, which is really going to lead to some issues in the bullpen. It means guys have to pitch twice, if not three times in an inning. The coaching staff's got to piece it together and pick out, okay, can this guy extend a little bit more than an inning, or is he a lefty righty situational guy, all with the mindset of completing the 9 innings, right? While you're still competing and trying to win the game. The good
Yeah.
news for LSU is that they've got that offense, right? And they're able to outslug teams, which kind of puts a Band-Aid and a mask on the bullpen, not or the pitching staff as a whole, let's be honest, not living up to what we thought they might be at this point in the season. Now,
Hmm.
does that mean they won't be able to do it going forward? No, I don't think so. I think there's some bright lights on the staff. They've just got to change a little bit of mindset and how they're attacking the strike zone and how they're attacking each situation in an effort to extend outings for these guys and put less of a tax on that bullpen.
That's a great segue. So, and that's obviously I do not know Wes Johnson, right? And the way he calls pitches is the way he calls pitches, and we are not privy to the scouting report or how they plan to attack people and all the analytics because they got a ton of it now, right? They know everybody's hot zone and whatnot. But let's get back to Christian Little. So he goes 3 1/3 today, 2 hits, 3 runs, 3 earned, 5 walks, but 5 Ks. And I would love to get your take on him because when I see Christian Little pitch, it's almost he pitches backwards a little bit in the sense that he really relies heavily on that cutter and that changeup, but the dude still throws 93 to 95, and it feels like I don't know if it's by design or he shakes off pitches, but they really lose sight of that fastball. Like it's almost like the longer the outing goes, the less and less you see of the fastball. What have you seen from Little, and do you feel the same way I do, or do you disagree on that point, just in terms of
That's
go ahead.
100% agree. Like, he needs to stay with that fastball. It's almost like you look at these guys these days and you see the Trackman and the Rapsodo and, just the gun score on the ESPN broadcast, and you're like, "My gosh, these guys are throwing 95, 96. Just
Yeah,
throw a fastball and get them out, like, let them get themselves out," right? Like, and you've got really good breaking stuff, oh, by the way, but, the heater is the best pitch in baseball, right? And so
yeah.
the fact that they get away from that and they get so deep in counts, and we can discuss this more with other guys,
Hmm.
but it starts to accumulate that pitch count, and that's when your bullpen starts getting depleted because you're having to go to them so early because your starter is throwing 75 pitches in 3 1/3 innings, right? And
Yeah.
so you feel like you're 2-2 or 3-2 every at bat while you're pitching, when you're not getting any early outs with your fastball. And I think that's they're missing the middle of the zone. And I know, like, you don't really want to throw for the middle of the zone, but there are times when you've got really good stuff and you pitch to contact, and so that limits your pitch count and allows you to extend outings and shorten that bullpen window.
I mean, that's a great point. And obviously, I watched the game with Jackson, my son, and I tell him a lot of times, like, when push comes to shove, as you just mentioned, just throw it down the middle. You're still throwing 94, right? Sometimes Bryce Collins and his pitch calling, right? He's known for throwing 6 or 7 curveballs, and it worked in game two. No, game one as he struck out Shelton, but today he throws like 6 or 7 curveballs, and the first two are in the dirt. Then he throws curveball, and they still haven't seen 94 yet, right?
Right.
They're seeing 74 benders, and I'm like, just throw it down the middle, and they're probably not going to know it hit them. But to your point, I totally agree, and I think that's an issue. And I really want to touch on that point as we get back to game one, since we're starting with game three right now. But in terms of the pen, it was just another turnstile day. Ackenhausen, who's coming off injury, and I really think Nate's going to be big down the stretch. He struggled today, inning and 2/3. You steal an inning with Blake Money, but then he comes out, and one time Jay Johnson doesn't go matchups. He leaves Money in to face Jarvis, and he pays for that as he gives up a double. But let's touch on Cooper. I thought he threw great. And as my son pointed out, he still threw great. I'm writing down comments about Cooper, and he gives up the 2-run home run to Seidel. But to me, and I want your take on Cooper, but from what I saw to him was the 2022 Riley Cooper, aggressive in the zone, a really good breaking ball, and I think we've seen that in flashes. And I thought he turned the corner a couple of weeks ago, but he still doesn't feel like he's there. What did you see from the big lefty today?
Well, I thought that he looked like he did last year, right? It looked like a
Yeah,
different guy, and he was very aggressive in the zone. Of course, he had the good slider going, and when he gets that going, he's pretty tough to handle. Um, but it's almost like a microcosm of the entire staff in that they're off their fastball. They're I hate to use the word afraid, but they're hesitant to throw their fastball to get outs, right? They want to
yeah,
set up that breaking pitch. And so that's almost permeated through the entire pitching staff. And so I think you're seeing that over and over again. I was, with one of our old teammates, Casey Kuntz, he was texting me during the game and he's like, man, why don't we throw strikes as a pitching staff? And the funny thing is, as soon as he said that, Alabama started doing it and walked like 5 in the inning, and I said, "See, the other guys do it too." Um, but man, it used to get drilled in our heads. Get ahead with your fastball, get ahead with your fastball, put them away with your good breaking stuff. And so when you get 2-0 in a count all the time, and then now you're worried about getting the fastball hit because they know it's coming at
yeah.
2-1, 3-0, 3-1. Then you get a little nervous about throwing it in the zone. So I think they've just got to kind of go back to the basics like they were doing early on, and get to a point where they're attacking the strike zone and they're saying, here comes the express, go ahead and hit it.
Yeah, no, I hear you. All right, I think our second guest has arrived now. Here we go, Moose. What's up, my man? How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing a hell of a lot better that I'm not sitting in traffic anymore. I'll tell you that. Goodness gracious. Whew.
No, man, no, no,
Drive
no.
home, boys.
Yeah, Coog and I have picked up the slack for you. I told everybody you were leaving the ballpark and just join us when you could. So, yeah, thanks for joining, brother. I told everybody where they could find all your stuff at. Obviously, his Twitter handle's right here. And make sure I'll mention now that he's on air, y'all catch the Musso at the Box podcast. But, Moose, we were just talking about we started with game 3. I know usually we go back to Friday, but since it just ended, it's fresh in everybody's mind. We kind of broke down. Cook did a great job talking about Christian Little's outing. And then we kind of moved, really just fast forward to Riley Cooper and how he looked today. Obviously, you were at the box. Maybe give us your, dissection of the pitching today with regards to Little, his outing, and then Cooper. I thought he looked great. Even though he gives up the home run, he still looked, and it's tough. I know when you're at the game, you can't tell, but he was on the corners, and his breaking ball was really good at the knees today. What did you think about those two guys since you were in the stadium?
Well, I'll start with Cooper. So what I've been saying with him is I've kind of been comparing it to the resurgence we saw from Bryce Collins. Different guys, obviously, but Bryce Collins earlier in the year, but he wasn't good. I mean, that's just, there's really no other way to put it. But he started to figure it out, strung some outings together, and now you feel like you can count on him again. You saw that last year from him, so you knew it was in there. Same thing with Riley Cooper. What you saw today, you saw last year from him. Against Tennessee in game 3, when Hurd couldn't make it out, they brought Cooper and he kind of stabilized the game. They just left him in a little too long, but he chewed up a lot of innings and gave you a shot. You've seen it last year. You know he can do that. You know he can do what he did today. He just needs to string those outings together. So that's what I'm looking for from him. String those outings together now. So can you build off of it like Bryce Collins did earlier in the season and once again become somebody that they can count on? Because here's the thing, guys. They're going to keep running him out there. He leads the team in appearances. That's not going to change. He has to get better. He has to string it together. I thought he pounded the zone today. That was different. Forgive me, I don't have a box score in front of me. I don't think he walked anybody. If he did, it was 1. It might have been the guy who came around to score. None? Okay, none. Perfect.
0.
Walks had really hurt him. I thought he made a bad pitch to Seidel. Kid hit it to center field. Okay, big deal. You had a 4-run lead. Great. What I would have liked to have seen them do is go after Pinckney in that spot because that was probably the one opportunity all weekend you had. If he hits a home run, who cares? You're still up 1. They toyed with him, put him on, and brought the tying run to the plate. I didn't love that.
Well, no, that's the part. No, they did. Well, they kind of toyed. That's when Jones dropped the fly ball, the pop.
They did, and it came back and got him. I know, but
yeah.
I mean, man, that's the one opportunity you had to really just attack the guy all weekend because his run was meaningless.
Right.
Christian Little, I thought pitched well, and then it just got away from him. I mean, the way he limited the damage in the first inning was elite, and that had been a problem for him kind of throughout the season. The big inning would kill him. breathe a little easier when they ruled Morgan dropped it on the transfer. But, they took advantage of that break. And I'll be honest, I didn't see it. I had thought he caught it and turned to watch the runner at third base to see him tag, and then heard a groan from the crowd.
I think what happened, and Coog, you were at home watching it. I don't know, Moose, if they explained it to you. I think what happened, though, they called Tamez passed up maybe Williamson. So they ruled him out.
Oh. Okay.
So, yeah, because Williamson, whoever was on first, it might have been Williamson. I think it was Williamson. Went back to tag, and Tamez passed him up because he thought, Morgan was going to catch it, right? And so when he passed him up, I think, because I saw Ronnie go back. Is that right, Coog? Is that what happened?
Yeah. That's the old Wade Semino play, Demu. You can't pass the guy up.
No. You got to retouch second base.
You got to retouch.
Yeah. So Moose, so Rance and them because I was with you, right? I thought this is going to be a disaster inning. But I thought what happened was, so it ended up being what and what, because you're going to get, even if Morgan catches, you're still going to give up a run. He gave up a run anyway. He gets out of it. But Rance and them went back on the broadcast, and hats off to the umpires for paying attention, right?
Yeah.
And so that's what happened. That's what happened. But, getting back to Little. So, he escapes that.
He started to settle in. It reminded me a lot of last week. I'm like, okay, he had the Rocky first last week against Ole Miss, settled in, got you 5 in the third. Looked like it was going to happen again. I kind of heard Cougar talking about it when I came on, the way they favor breaking stuff. And, he has been the chief – I don't want to say chief offender, but you know what I mean, of that all the way since fall ball. He pitches off his breaking stuff so much that if he doesn't have it, it's hard to find the zone. And there just wasn't enough strikes late in the outing, 5 walks. I think he hit a guy you're not going to get deep. It was disappointing to see both him and Floyd follow up the outing they had in Oxford with what they did this weekend. So back to the drawing board there and see if you can put together a solid outing from those two against Auburn.
Yeah, Moose, and Coogan actually touched on that. We talked about how Little still throws low to mid 90s, and a lot of times it feels like he just loses, whether by design or that's the plan going in. But it seems like that's his MO. He just loses sight of his fastball, and there's so many cutters and so many changeups to where even if he gets ahead with them, right, Coog, it's like he bounces one, he misses, and now it's 3-2, and he'll still throw it again for a strike.
Right.
But it's
whether he starts 0-2 or 2-0, he still ends up 3-2, and that drives your pitch count up, and so that's causing some issues across the board. Yeah,
but in terms of the hitters in Game 3, look, LSU comes back again. We'll get into the other two games in a second. They were down 7-3. They score 6 in the 5th, 2 in the 7th, 2 in the 8th. LSU hits 4 home runs on the day. Cruz, Thompson, Jones, and Kling. Kling, welcome back to the lineup as he hits a bomb out there. LSU scored, and Moose, I know you're just running back. Don't worry, I got all the stats for you, buddy. I got you covered.
Appreciate that.
We got you. Cougs even got some. He's over and broke some out already. Look, they scored 33 runs in 3 games. And Moose, I listened to your podcast before the series, and on mine too. Alabama was the second best pitching staff heading into this weekend in the SEC. So, Coog, just obviously you're a pitcher, and what do you think about this lineup and the fact that they're never out of it, right? They're down continually, it feels back. And I put this out on Twitter, like I've never doubted their ability, but sometimes, bro, you just can't keep coming back. And they continue to do it. And when they score 33 runs against the second best pitching staff in the SEC, what does that say about these guys,
It says a lot, because I'm like you. There were a couple times this weekend specifically, you look at things and you're like, oh boy, we got some issues here. This is going to be trouble to try to pull it out. And then they pull Travinsky off the bench, and he hits a clutch bomb. And then you get Paxton today, who extends the lead, which ends up being, probably the game clincher because of what happened in the 9th. There's no DOs, Demu, right? There's no designated outs in this lineup, right? You've got Milazzo right now batting 350 plus right now. He had a big at bat late in the game to drive.
We're going to get to those guys.
He extended the inning, drove in the run to extend the lead there, I believe, in the bottom of the 8th. So I have no business wanting to pitch to that lineup, right? Forget about Cruz and White in the middle. I mean, the guy that you fear probably the least right now is Gavin Dugas, just because he's just having a little bit of a rough time. But I don't want to face that. I mean, that guy's like Jason Williams. I mean, like he puts the bat on the ball most of the time. He scares you because you can't strike him out. He's going to foul you off, and he's going to extend at bats, and he's going to put it in play most of the time. And so that does a lot to an opposition's pitching staff, right? That instills fear when even if guys aren't getting hits, if they're taking tough swings on you and extending at bats and making you go 8-9 pitches in a single at bat, after the course of a ball game, let alone a 3-game series, that has a lot of effect, on the outcome, especially when you get to the 9th, 7th, 8th, 9th inning of a Sunday series, when you're trying to get a sweep or you're trying to win the second game out of 3 to just win a series. And so the fact that they can do this on a consistent basis is very impressive. It also picks up a pitching staff who's not doing very well right now.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. It's always good to know that even if you give it up a little bit as a pitcher, that their ability to come back is probably going to save you more often than not.
I'm guilty of that, and I'm very proud to have had good offenses behind me.
Yeah, and they're Moose, we've talked about it. I know you've talked about it, but just you saw Jones move down to the 9-hole yesterday. But just the depth of this lineup. Kling comes off the bench. I was telling my son before he got on the air, if Kling comes back healthy and Javen Coleman, we'll get into him in a second. I want to talk about him in game 2. But if you get a couple guys healthy, they're already scary. So, what was your feeling at the box, Moose? They're down 7-3. It doesn't look great. You're like, we have an opportunity to sweep, but all of a sudden they come roaring back. They start winning the free base war. They start working walks, a couple of singles, and all of a sudden they take the lead. What did you think about that? And, how was the box at that point?
I mean, the box was – excuse me. First, I mean, the box was great for 3 days. I mean, last night when they brought Alton Davis into that game, I mean, it was rocking. That was a hell of a thing. And look, he's going to have much better days. That kid's awesome.
He's a dude. Dude.
That was a hell of a spot for a true freshman to come in. And, I said it before the series. I'm glad they had this one at home. If they had to go to Tuscaloosa, they probably don't get away with 2 out of 3 in this one. They probably don't. If everything's even and it's on the road, they're in trouble. The box was a factor this weekend. So from that standpoint, it was great. Maybe I was still living off yesterday, but even when they were down 4, I'm like, okay, they came back from 5 yesterday. They've got a shot. They've got Furtado left, and they've got Probst. Other than that, you've seen their best and you've hit their best. They're going to make their run. And they made it a little differently today. They instead worked a bunch of counts, were very patient, drew a lot of walks in the 5th inning. But, I mean, you had maybe 1 batted bat out of 12 in that 5th inning. Yeah, you only got 3-4 hits, but everyone just – you go back and look at the play-by-play, I bet you the majority of those walks were in full counts because they just worked it to that point. They were very disciplined. And how many times have we heard – I know you two have heard it, this team strikes out too much. Well, today they didn't. Like, today they were very disciplined, and it made it really hard on the bottom of Alabama's bullpen. Well, and the thing, too, I'm sorry, you hit their best. You hit Davis. You hit Quick. You hit Probst. You hit Furtado. You hit the best they had to offer.
Well, and you remember 2 months ago when the narrative about this team was they couldn't hit left-handed pitching.
Yeah.
And now it doesn't seem to matter, so –
yeah, and Musso, I'm looking at that inning. So in the 5th, and we'll kind of end it here on the game from today. But in the 5th, they scored 6. So in the 5th, it goes E5. So Milazzo leads it off with an E5. Dugas gets hit. Morgan walk, Cruz single, Tank single, and I was like, man, it's like they didn't get that big double or that single down the line that scores 2, and then but Beloso works an 0-2 walk, a fabulous at bat. I think against Furtado, the lefty, he got up to 97. He goes 0-2. Yeah, 0-2, and Beloso locks in. JT gets a walk. Jones hits a sacrifice fly, then a walk, a single. I mean, the inning just goes on and on and on. It's just the play discipline by these guys is just amazing. So, all right, let's move on to game 2. And look, we got to talk about it. Rehash your memory. So LSU wins that one in 12-8 fashion, come from behind fashion again. And Moose, Cook and I are going to have to rely a little bit more on you for this one because I caught like the first 2 innings and the last 3. As I was at a function, Coog, you were at what? You had a function too, right? As I recall.
Yeah, I was in a wedding.
All right, so Moose, Ty Floyd. Obviously, we're not here to bash Ty Floyd. We love Ty Floyd, but we got to talk about Ty Floyd. Nobody's here to bash him, obviously. So on the day, Floyd goes 2 2/3, 6 hits, 6 runs, 6 earned, 4 walks, 2 Ks. And I want to throw this out. I did the numbers for y'all. Okay, let me find my numbers here. Ty Floyd, 7 SEC games started. His average game started, so his average line score is, this is rough math, right? 4 2/3, 4 hits, 4 runs, 4 earned. His last 3 out of 4 outings, he has more walks than Ks. So I know Jay is going to keep running him out there. So for people to say you got to pull him, he's not going to pull him, right? Ty Floyd needs to be part of the starting pitching staff. But Musso, I'll throw it to you, then I'll throw it to Coog. What do we make of Ty Floyd? We know he was great at Ole Miss, right? 8 1/3, he was fabulous. But is that average line score, 4 2/3, 4 hits, 4 runs, 3 earned in SEC play? Do you think that's, is that good enough? Are you okay with that? Are you worried about that?
That's interesting numbers. Look, if Ty Floyd's getting you into the 5th inning on average, after Skenes gives you 6, and they've worked out a really nice little 1-2. They try to go use 2 pitchers, Skenes, Herring, get the double on Friday night. If you're working it that way with this offense, I would say yes, that is enough. It's not always going to be pretty. I look at the Arkansas game. He was awesome. Got you into the 7th inning. I look at Tennessee, where he outlasted a future first-rounder in Chase Burns, got the win in that game. He was awesome. I didn't think he was really particularly bad against Kentucky. It started bad, but he extended and got you deeper in the game. Got you. I think he actually threw 4 2/3 that night. He definitely got you into the 5th inning. Ole Miss was fantastic. It's the ones in between that. Yesterday, South Carolina, the walks have just been the problem for him. Now, look, I'll let you guys kind of talk about this a little bit more, but what I see with him is we know what Ty Floyd's best pitch is. It's his fastball. That's been his best pitch since he was a freshman, and it's a really good fastball, especially at the top of the zone. Got a lot of movement, a lot of carry on it. It plays. But when he doesn't have that, the secondary stuff is not good enough to back it up. He is one of the guys on this team that still does pitch off his fastball. And last night, it looked very much like, okay, a Ty Floyd outing. He struggled in the first, a lot of pitches, but got out of it. Relatively easy second. Relatively easy beginning of the third. The problem is he lost the strike zone with 2 outs. Nobody on, 2 outs. And then he couldn't get out of the 3rd inning. That just can't happen. More balls than strikes is you're never going to have success doing that. So is the 4 2/3, 4 earned good enough for me with this offense? Yes, I think it is. And I think the fact that he's still 6-0 kind of proves that. They've always dug him out of the hole, but you just need more consistency. And for me, it has to start with the fastball. That is his best pitch. It always will be his best pitch. And if he does not have it, it's a long night for him.
Okay. Well, okay. So that's an interesting point, because I think a little bit differently, like in terms of he has to start with the fastball. Coog, what do you think about Floyd just in general? You've seen him pitch a bunch. I know you missed the other night. It was kind of just a regular Ty Floyd outing. I almost think, I know it's his best pitch, Mooch. Just hear me out. And Coog, let me know. You can crush me if you think this is a terrible take. I almost think he pitches too much off his fastball. Now, I've seen the scrimmages. You were there, Moose. And his stuff, he does have breaking stuff, right? He added a slider this year. Yeah. He has a changeup. He has a curveball. But I feel like he doesn't flash that enough to where if I'm an opposing hitter, if I'm Auburn, I'm going to say, don't even consider another pitch when you face Ty Floyd. All we're going to do is sit 94, 95 the whole time, no matter what, right? No matter what. Coog, is that a bad take? And just kind of circle back to, just Ty Floyd in terms of what you've seen from him this year, even though you missed last night.
Yeah, no, I think that both of you make really solid points. The only thing I'll push back on Moose is saying that that's good enough. Okay, just based on your rough math, Moo, that's a 9 ERA in SEC, right? So your offense is going to have to score at least 10 to win, okay? And you're getting 4-point-something innings, which means you're taxing your bullpen as well. I think there's a little bit something more to it because I noticed something when I went back and watched the game last night when I saw Floyd give up the home run early. He looked defeated when he gave up that home run, as if he couldn't believe that the ball went out of the ballpark, even though the wind is blowing, 20 miles out to right field. And it was almost like he was ready to make that move to build on the outing from Ole Miss, and then he gives up that first home run, and he couldn't believe it. And then all those bad thoughts start creeping in and start coming to the forefront, where you try to push them to the back once you have that good outing, and you're going to try to build on it like he had versus Ole Miss. And I think that was the problem. So I think their pitching mental mindset is a little bit off right now, where they're not really pitching to their strengths, right? And it may not apply as much to Floyd because he does rely so much on his fastball. I do think his fastball is good enough because with his RPMs and he's got the lift to it a little bit, and it rides on guys. So it's a lot different of a view for a hitter than the typical fastball that's 94 to 96. So I think they've got to get mentally stronger on the mound and throw to attack the zone and pitch more to contact rather than starting counts 2-0 and 3-1 and then trying to battle so much to get back in the count and give the bullpen some breathing room, right? Like I think it's just too much right now.
Strike one doesn't happen enough with this group.
No, that's a great point. And even and I felt like Ty Floyd had kind of been a victim of a small zone sometimes, but you saw at Ole Miss. From my vantage point, he actually had a bigger zone, a la 90s zone Coog, and he was able to take advantage of that. He was painting the outside corner. And Moose, I do not disagree that his fastball is the best pitch. It's just, to me, I feel like even if he would flip a breaking ball in there and it misses, so now you're 1-0, at least they know that he has that pitch. And we've seen him throw dirty changeups, and they know, okay, he has that pitch. I just wonder if Wes Johnson's like, you know what, he doesn't have those pitches today, and his fastball is still plenty good enough. So we're just going to roll with that and let the chips fall where they may. So, Moose, you're going to comment?
Well, no, pitch backwards. I mean, I hear you. I'm never opposed to that. My thing with what I more meant was I don't think he's had great consistency with the fastball as of late, to where it's not even working to pitch off of it. He has to have the consistency to do that. If he doesn't have that, while the secondary stuff is improved, I don't think it's to the level of like a Christian Littles where he has it, he can dominate a lineup with it. He still has to have the fastball, and when he hasn't had it, particularly up in the zone, it just makes for a long outing for him.
Yeah.
And the number two, I'm sorry, the number 42 for Alabama, the lefty who gave up the homer last night, and then the lefty today. My gosh, those guys are going to be studs. Dude. You're not going to want to see them in Tuscaloosa next year. I can promise you that.
No.
And I know Moose talked about it on his podcast, and I mentioned it too. But Alton Davis, Coog, the 6'4", the kid that Travinsky got, he hadn't given up a run in SEC play, and he's a freshman. He's just a tall drink of water right now, and he's 95, 96, 94. I mean, I heard people say that. And Moose, you maybe even said on your podcast that they talk about he has the best stuff on that staff, like period. For sure. Like as a freshman.
And he's very raw. You can see he probably hasn't pitched a ton, but man, they're going to be good going forward. So look out for those guys.
No doubt. And that's why I was worried about them, this weekend, just because they're a veteran lineup. Those dudes have been through the wars in terms of their, the hitters that they returned, and you saw that. But getting back to game two, so where the bullpen struggled a little bit today, in game two, you saw the bullpen. It was another turnstile effort, but they were lights out, right? The bullpen goes 6 1/3, 3 hits, 2 runs, if my math is correct. Yep. And Moose, obviously, you were there for that one, right? You were there for last night, yes.
Oh yeah.
What did you think? What did you think of the pen? Let's touch specifically. We saw a lot of guys, but I missed it, and so did Coog. Javen Coleman and his outing, he goes 2 1/3. 3 walks, 6 Ks. And then Thatcher Hurd at the end. Let's talk first about Coleman, though, and what you saw from Coleman.
So easily the best outing he's had since he's come back. I know it's only number 3. Fastball was up to 96 at one point, really sat pretty comfortably 93 to 95 in the zone. But the difference was he finally had his slider, and it was filthy. I mean, it was wipe out. You mentioned the 3 walks. One of them was intentional. So, I mean, I'll give him 2. The 6 punch outs. So the bullpen in that 6 1/3 had 8 strikeouts. He had 6 of them. He was dominant, pounded the zone. The slider was the difference, though. I mean, it had been a lot of fastball from him in those first 2 outings. He finally had complete control. I mean, he just – the confidence he had in that breaking ball last night in his first inning, he struck out the side in order, all looking. I mean, he just had him totally off balance. It looked like everything you wanted it to when everyone had kept saying, man, they get Javen Coleman back. Watch out, they get Javen Coleman back. Well, last night they got Javen Coleman back, and if he's going to look like that, watch out.
Yeah, it's nice to see him extend. And I put a random thought out there. I was just thinking about some things in this broadcast, and I said I didn't get into arguments with people on Twitter. I just had some lively discussions, and one of my friend of mine just disagreed with me. But I think if you extend him out to 5 innings, and I don't want to get off topic here, but to me, I start him game 1 in the regional. That's getting way ahead of ourselves, and that's a talk for another time. But Hurd, real quick, Moose, before I move to Coogan, and I want to hear Coog talk on Hurd a little bit and what he's seen from Thatcher Hurd this year. But what did you think about Hurd coming in that closing role before? He looked better, right? He looked good. You know, his velocities. Yeah, go ahead.
5 up, 5 down. I mean, that's what you want, right? I thought he looked pretty good Tuesday night as well against Nichols. And, you know, when I recapped that game, I said, okay, can he now build on it? And he did. He looked confident. Like that was the biggest difference for me. He looked confident. He didn't look hesitant. He took control of the game. And if you're going to come in that role, you absolutely have to do that. He did. He pounded the zone. I don't think he walked any. No, of course he had 5 up, 5 down. So he didn't walk anybody. Like he was. I mean, the velocity, like you said, was good. It was his, 93 to 96. Fastball was good. The cutter that they have him for the development of that pitch has been great. It was a hell of a step in the right direction. I'll say with Thatcher Hurd.
Coog, on Hurd, I think what you mentioned about Floyd sometimes in his mental mindset, I personally know this is just me projecting, right? What I see from the kid through the TV. He's probably never thrown like this in his life, right? He dealt last year at UCLA. You got to imagine, obviously, he was a stud in high school, right? He was a big-time pitcher. He's probably never had this much frustration or this. He's probably questioned himself at times this year. But what have you seen from Hurd in terms of his stuff? And then, they don't have a true closer, but, I mean, what do you think the next couple of weeks look like for Hurd? Maybe if you could put your hat on, your coaching hat on. I know it's a tough one. I know.
So the reason why I hesitate on that is just because early in the season you heard how much Jay said that without Thatcher Hurd as our number 2 starter or a starter, we can't get as high as we want. So I don't know where that lands eventually, but I hear what you're saying. And I thought, and Musso and I talked about this on his podcast, and then Charlie Hannegriff had me on his show about a week ago, and we talked about Thatcher Hurd, and it looks like his frame of mind is a little bit different, like where he gets a little upset from time to time, and he pitches around the plate and not aggressive to the plate. I thought last night, because I ended up getting back from the wedding and seeing Hurd the entire time, I thought he was aggressive to the plate. Like his body language looked like a completely different person last night. I mean, he was quick twitch, like his motion looked better. His arm speed looked aggressive. He was throwing and missing down the middle, and they weren't touching him, And so he's got to realize he's got that kind of stuff, and he can throw like that. And then I think you've got something in the way of a closer potentially, right? If you can't close if you can't throw strikes, right? You can nibble and you can start and try to survive, but if you can't throw strikes, you can't close. So I think that's interesting. You brought that up. I didn't really think of it from the standpoint of him being in a closer role last night. I thought it was out of necessity. But he did a great job, And look, if he can fill that role, why not let him do it, right? I mean, he's got A+ stuff, whether it's the fastball, the sinker, and the breaking stuff. He can do that.
Yeah, no doubt. And no, I totally agree. I thought sometimes it feels like he pulls off a little bit and his arm, leaves everything up. But when he's driving through the zone and it looked like he was finishing down, he got away with it. Just kind of been a victim, it seems like, of some hanging breaking stuff at times. And that's just kind of got him in a little bit of fun. I just think he needs, Coogan, you can appreciate this. He just needs like a double play, a line drive at him, somebody to miss a pitch down the middle to where he has a 3-up, 3-down, and he puts like 2 or 3 of those together, and then he's like, "Oh yeah, I am really, really good." So I can,
no,
I can do
agree,
this.
and I think you made a good point. Sometimes he does finish up high, right? And I think what we saw was he was aggressive and reaching and finishing through the plate last night, which looked really good to me.
Yeah, no doubt. I totally agree. All right, Moose. So just to recap some of the hitters, look, White hits a massive 3-run home run in the third to kind of get LSU back in it. Travinsky adds another 2-strike. This guy, massive home run against, there it is right there as we pop it up on the screen, against Alton Davis as he takes 0-2, 95 out the yard. Jones adds a home run in the 8th. So let's talk about that catching position real quick. And just for the people at home, I did the math. So LSU in that game, in game 2, they were down 2-0, came back. They were down 6-1. They were down 2-0. Then they were down 6-1. Then they were down 7-4. They come all the way back, and they score 8 runs total in the 6th, 7th, and 8th. So once again, that grit and determination. But Moose, Travinsky 2 weeks in a row, and Coog touched on Milazzo and what you're getting from him. Obviously, Brady Neal's hurt right now. But what do you make of these guys just stepping in? They're vets. They've been there. But this how they solidified that catching spot the last couple of weeks when they've been called upon.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think you mentioned it. They're veteran guys. I mean, and both of them are Louisiana guys, too. And, I mean, y'all can speak to that. That matters in this program. You need program guys like that, you know what, man, this freshman, this 17-year-old freshman comes in from Florida and takes our spot just immediately day one. They don't get down about it. They keep their head down. They keep working for the letters across the front of the jersey, not on the back of the jersey, and their hard work's paying off. You think back to where LSU was at a catcher position after Michael Papierski left. You didn't replace him very well, right? You had Hunter Fiducia, you had Saul Garza. Not to disparage those guys, they played hard. But now you look where you were to where you are, where Brady Neal, a top 30 prospect in the draft, shows up on campus, takes the job, gets hurt, and you have these veteran program guys like Milazzo, like Travinsky that you can go to, and you don't miss a beat. You have that type of depth and that type of quality depth to go to. That's why, I'm obviously not the catcher position as a whole, but that scenario is why, despite bullpen problems, despite starters not going deep, despite any issue you want to name with this team, 35 and 8.5 game out of first place in the SEC and number 1 in the country. That scenario is why.
And by the way, you've got one starting at first base.
Exactly.
That's true. And one in right field. And right field.
Right field.
Yes. He's in right field. Yeah, it's a gluttony of catchers. In Coug, the catchers go 4 for 9. I mean, we wouldn't have said this last year, right? Well, McManus, he hit the ball pretty well. 4 for 9 on the weekend with a bomb and 6 RBIs. I mean, I've had people ask me this, and I'll ask you this so everybody else can hear your opinion. When you were at LSU with me, did it matter who you threw to? Did you care who was behind the plate? We've seen Travinsky the last 2 weeks catch Floyd right against Ole Miss, and now I don't know if he's his personal catcher. That's my working theory, and I don't know if that's right or not. But how did you feel, if you had a different guy catch you? Obviously, we had Lanier in 96 and 97. We had Clint Earnhardt and Conan Horton. And then Cressy came into the mix. Did it matter to you who was back there?
I think it did in the fall. But as you get comfortable with them, I mean, you throw in bullpen days, different guys. I mean, it's like who's got class and who's hurt. So you take who you got, right? And the way you structure a team and a position coach, because now it's gotten really specific with catchers, right? There is a guy who's like singled out to coach the catchers. They're all going to do a lot of similar things. And so I think that there's less of it. I think in the big leagues, you see a lot more of that. It's just a comfort level. And, I think Maddox had a guy and Avery had his guy and Smoltz had his guy. And that's kind of where it got in vogue that you'd pick your personal catcher. But no, I really don't think that it matters too much. I mean, if a guy's a viable candidate to get in the lineup, he's going to be good enough to catch whoever's out there. And so I don't fall into that where, hey, I got to have my own specific guy. I think if the coach thinks he's good enough to be in the lineup that day, heck, look, even if he's not the greatest catcher, but he's in the lineup because he got the potential to hit 2 bombs and erase the 2 bombs that I just gave up, I'm gonna take him in the lineup.
Yeah,
So
no
give me
doubt. 2 bombs with 2.
Travinsky.
Yeah, 2 bombs with 2 strikes right there. So yeah, it's Matt has a comment right here on the screen. So he says there's definitely some guys you don't want at all. I think I've been asked this before, and I don't know if Coop feels the same way, but I think when I was pitching, we were told to bounce breaking balls in certain times. And as long as I knew, and I knew, trust me, that they wouldn't be back there if they couldn't. As long as I knew those guys were going to block that that breaking ball, that I could throw with the men on second and third, a guy on third with a 1-2 count. If I knew they were going to block it, then I was fine with it. I didn't care about the rest. And you've seen
I
that with these
completely
guys.
agree. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, just the mindset of Travinsky, to hit 2 home runs with 2 strikes, 2 massive home runs has just been huge. But getting a little long on time here. Let's move on to game 1. We're working backwards here as you can't sweep if you don't win the first one. But LSU wins the first one 8-6. They really dominated this game until the 9th, and it kind of got a little hairy for all the LSU fans out there. But Paul Skenes was Paul Skenes once again. And Coog, I'm going to start with you on this one, then I'm going to bring it to Musso. Skenes, 6 innings pitched, 5 hits, 1 run, 1 earned, no walks, 9 Ks for really the best pitcher in the country. But he throws 109 pitches and 6 innings pitched. And we talked about this before we came on the broadcast. And look, I get it. I'm probably nitpicking. But I do have a little bit of concern. Coog, are you concerned with he throws a lot of pitches. He strikes out a ton of guys. Are you worried about that moving forward to where if it's a regional or super regional situation, or hopefully they get to Omaha and you really wanted to get 7 1/3, 7 2/3, but because he's thrown 115 pitches and he struck out 12, he just can't get past the 6. Is that a concern for you moving forward, Skenes?
Yeah, I think it is. I mean, it's a head scratcher, right? And concern maybe sounds strong because you might see him get stretched out a little bit more going into the postseason, right? The weather warms up and he's got some innings under his belt, and he can throw 15 more pitches in an appearance. But yeah, so 6 innings. And now, because you look at it, and especially when you get to the standpoint of a super regional, and if you look at it like a weekend that we had this weekend where we had 8 different pitchers on Saturday and however many we had today, that's taxing for your bullpen. So if you can have an Aaron Nola type outing, right, where he gets you through 8 and you don't have to have a guy come in and just get 3 outs and save you for the next 2 games should you have to play all 3, that makes you breathe a lot easier, right? And so no, is Skeens like not good anymore? Of course not. That's not what we're trying to say here. But
Right.
it does give you a little bit of look at the inside of what Jay is looking at and how he crafts the back end of the bullpen on a Friday or on a game 1 of a regional or super regional to get himself through the entire weekend in a positive manner where you're not completely putting guys 2 to 3 times out there for an entire weekend. So, yeah, I mean, if you could get a few fly ball outs or ground ball outs early in counts,
Yeah.
and get him to go 8 innings with 10 strikeouts or 7 innings with 11 strikeouts, yeah, that's better than 6 with 9 strikeouts. We are nitpicking here, but yeah, it's something that you look at, Chris. I mean, obviously, we look at the analytics and things that we look at in the past, and that's something you keep an eye towards.
Yeah. And I think they put up a graphic. I wish they would do this more, but he threw 80% fastballs, Moose, and you've really seen like the Paul Skenes. I call it the Paul Skenes evolution, right? To where against Kentucky, he was heavy sliders. Against Ole Miss, he was crushing them with 2-seamers and really busting those lefties, two-seamers in. And once again, he's heavy fastballs. But to piggyback off what Coog was saying, does that high pitch count and the ability maybe to extend – like we all want Skenes to throw 9. Who doesn't, right? But does that worry you a little bit? I mean, we would, in a perfect world, of course, we want him to go 9. But does that same question to you? Does that worry you a little bit moving forward? Big picture now, big picture.
It worries me more earlier in the game than it does later. I'd like to see him keep the pitch count lower in the first and second inning, and then get deeper. Because against Ole Miss, you could tell by the second inning, you were getting 5, maybe 6, and they had to really grind him to get 6. He threw 117 pitches against Ole Miss. Same thing. He was almost at 60 pitches after 3 innings on Friday night. You knew the cap is 6. So I think if you get a little sharper earlier in the game, then maybe you obviously see him extend a little further. You mentioned the 80% fastball thing, and that's interesting because I saw some people say after Friday, maybe he didn't have his best stuff. I thought he had better stuff Friday than he did against Ole Miss and than he did against Kentucky. Like I thought those outings were actually he didn't have his best stuff. I thought he looked really, really good against Alabama, against a much better lineup than Ole Miss and Kentucky, for what it's worth. I think Bama did a great job running his pitch count up. I think they fouled off a lot of pitches. They didn't chase it all weekend. I think that really hurt him this week. But it has been – I mean, you go back and look at all of the starts. I think he's thrown 7 innings one time. Every other outing's been 6 innings. So, yeah, I'd like to see him extend a little bit more. But I think the first 3 innings are really the key to that.
No doubt. I think you make a great point. And it really almost kind of circles back to what we've talked about earlier. And Coog, you've harped on this to where it really seems like Skenes will go 0-2, and then it's 1-2. Then it's 2-2, then it's a foul ball, and then it's a foul ball. And it's almost like his slider is so nasty. I never had this problem, but he has trouble like getting it in the zone. And then all of a sudden it's 2-2, and he can get it in the zone. But it's like it's 0-2, and he tries to throw it like wait, and ends up in the other batter's box to where it would just seem like, to y'all's point, y'all both made it, saying the same thing. If he could get earlier outs or earlier strikeouts, right? Instead of getting a 3-2 strikeout, get a 1-2 strikeout.
Yeah.
Then that saves you 10, 12 pitches down the road. And that could get you almost save you another inning if you think about it.
That's kind of like the little thing. If, when he's got that short cutter slider, when he's getting the swings and misses, usually on a 3-2 count, if he throws that 0-0 and gets a cap ball, right at the second baseman, that could save you 6-8 pitches an inning,
Yeah, there's no doubt. But Moose, I'll stick with you on this. Herring comes in after Skenes. A little bit of a rough one for Griffin Herring, but I do like the fact that they've been following Skenes up with Herring. I like that dynamic with the righty-lefty and Herring. Look, his stuff is no slouch. 2 2/3, 6 hits, 5 runs, 5 earned, 2 walks, 5 Ks, 72 pitches. I think the goal, he was right there, right? In the 9th, he goes strikeout, walk, strikeout. And he's 1 pitch away, as we always like to say, and he's right there. And I think the inning got away from him. And my theory is, I wasn't there, that Collins wasn't hot yet. And then when it got away, he had a chance to face a lefty and he couldn't get Williamson out. And all of a sudden, Money sits down, Collins gets up. I think it got away because they didn't have the right guys in place. And he's still 1 pitch away. Then a lefty came up and he tried to get him out, but he couldn't. What'd you make about Herring? He seems to be up and down. I think that's probably just some freshman things. But what have you made about Herring lately, and just maybe his outing on Friday and then him following Skenes,
I thought eventually in that 9th inning he flat ran out of gas.
72 pitches, yeah.
Yeah, that's by far the most he's thrown. And he just I think it started to happen a little bit before that. Because like you said, he'd get to 1 strike away. He just couldn't be as fine as he needed to be to make that pitch to get the last out. Missed arm side a lot high late in that inning as well. I don't know. I honestly think he just ran out of gas. Maybe Collins wasn't hot enough at that point. I'm not expecting that to happen again, right? I don't. He's been so consistent, so good as a freshman. His future's so bright. I'm willing to be like, okay, that one got away from him. It shouldn't have been as close as it was, but you had dominated the rest of the game and you were in a position to have a little bit of leeway. I know that's not a great mindset. That's not where you want to be, but that's the position you were in, and thank your lucky stars you were. I just think kind of what you said. I mean, I just think the inning got away from him. It was a combination of maybe potentially them not being hot in the bullpen, not having their horses ready to go when they needed to, and then I think he just flat ran out of gas towards the end. He was in uncharted territory.
Yeah, no doubt. Coog, anything on I think you said you weren't able to see Herring's outing, but just thoughts on him and then the ability to follow Skenes right there. And you've seen him, like he closed it down against Tennessee, and he's been really good. Kentucky wasn't great. I was there for that one. It just wasn't great. And I think he's the opposite of the mindset to where he's competitive now. I mean, he's been there and done that in Texas at the highest levels of baseball in Texas, but he almost gets so mad at himself for throwing a ball, right? To where you're like, dude, you're good. Just relax. And your stuff's plenty good enough.
My guess is that with that lead, they had the ability to stretch him out, right? And like Moose said, like he emptied the tank. And I think that might have been by design a little bit. Well, I agree with you about the up and down thing with money than to Collins, and there was a little switch on who was hot and who wasn't, and when they switched it. But the fact that they let him go 73, that kind of gives you maybe a peek through a window of what they're thinking on who might be that long guy, or let's say Skenes goes out or Floyd goes out and doesn't have a great outing and has to get yanked early, and you need a guy to go 5 to 6 innings. And, at 72 pitches, there's not a whole lot of other people that have done that except for the starters. So keep that in your back pocket as Griffin Herring, could be that guy that they look to in a situation like that.
No doubt. And I think you make some really good points. But in terms of hitters, White hits a home run, Cruz hits a home run. Really not a lot to say. They kind of come back, they extend the game with a couple of back-to-back walks. But we're going to start to wrap up here on the 60 feet 6 inches live stream, as got Matthew Musso and Patrick Coogan joining me. Get ready to let these guys get out of here. We've got a couple of comments, though. Let's see if we can bring those up right now. All right, Brody says, what are y'all's thoughts on starting a lefty on the weekends, Herring or Coleman, once he's extended? Coog, you just maybe alluded to that. I mentioned it in the regionals. I wouldn't be surprised if you see that. But do you think they make any change, Coog? And then I'll flip it to Musso before SEC plays over with Brody's question.
I don't think so. But then you always flip it for the regionals, right? You don't want to spend a Skenes guy against a number 4 seed, right?
Right.
So then you've got to look to candidates of who that could be. And I think Griffin Herring would be a great one. Javen Coleman would be a great one, right? And probably Coleman over Herring because of the way you've groomed him to work on the back end of that bullpen behind Skenes. And so I would say Javen Coleman was probably the likely candidate to start that opening game of a regional.
Moose, what do you have on Brody's question right there? Yeah, no, I mean, I don't think you see it in the regular season. Personally, I love having a left-handed pitcher in the starting rotation. I think you should if you have that luxury. The one thing you have to remember, though, is what Jay has said. One of their best pitchers is always going to be in the bullpen. So pick your poison on one of them. One of them sure can start, but the other has to stay in the pen. And especially when you look at LSU's pen, where it's been very up and down. It's been a roller coaster. At times it's been great. That was Saturday. And at times it's been not so great. That was today. So there's always going to be one of those guys in the pen. And I mean, again, whoever spot they take in the rotation, potentially, can you count on that person out of the bullpen? That's important to factor into it too. But yes, no lefty in the rotation, all for it.
Yep, no doubt. Let's see if we can get another one up here. How many home runs does LSU have? I think they're like at 74, 80? Maybe.
That was coming in. They got to be over 80 by now.
Yeah, but ranked top 10 in the nation, we had a last year's total. I don't know. Right off the top of my head, Michael, I forgot. I got a lot of stats. I forgot to get the final stats from today. They may not have updated them yet, but I predicted them to hit about one.
Jack Caglione from Florida has hit more home runs than LSU. That guy hits like 2 home runs a game. He's got 25 already.
I know. What do they have?
Third in player of the year.
They have 4 guys in double digits, right? 4 guys, and Beloso's knocking on the door.
Beloso's knocking on the door.
They have Cruz, White, Dugas, and
They're
Jones.
over 80. They're over 80 right now. They hit 114 last year, so yes, they're ahead of pace. They are well ahead of that pace.
There you go, Michael. So Musso coming through. Who finishes with the top and home runs on the team? Matt, I have Tommy White. Who y'all got? Coog, what you got?
I'll go Tommy White.
Moose.
I'll be different and say Jared Jones.
There we go. Big Bear. The Big Bear.
He's one
Matt,
behind White.
Matt, I got your shirt on right now. Matt is part of the Spittin' Seeds account, so I got the Spittin' Seeds shirt on right now. Anything else over there? See how Craig Schilling, the master of the GIFs.
The GOAT.
The tighter strike zone, I think guys are missing at least 5 strikes an inning. All right, this has been – I've noticed this. Coog, we'll go to you, then we'll go to Musso. Musso, I know you're at the games a ton, so you might not always be able to tell. Coog, I'm not saying it needs to be 1990 strike zone. We loved it, but it was a bit ridiculous. And I don't think it has to be a Major League Baseball, but it seems like it's like nothing. Like the black, it seems like doesn't even count. And it feels like the belt is not even a strike anymore, which irks me to death. What do you think? Do you think the zone has gotten significantly smaller or it's been trending that way?
I still feel like, I think east to west, it's much tighter, right? The black doesn't play a whole lot. I think north to south, there's been some expansion there, especially on the north end of the equator. I mean, you see some hanging sliders that, cross at the letters, and they're routinely ringing those up. Not a whole lot at the back end of a count, but early in the count, they're calling those. That's just kind of the feel I get. To me, those look like hanging pitches to me that I don't want to throw those, but I think the northern equator gets a lot more calls these days than in past.
Moose, what's your take on the strike zone this year?
I think it's much more akin to Major League Baseball, and I don't like it. This isn't Major League Baseball. I'm sorry. It's not. Like, this is not Major League Baseball. And what Cougar's saying, especially up in the zone. Everyone pitches up in the zone now. Velo, spin rate, RPM, all that stuff so prevalent, and especially in Major League Baseball, it just – you sit down, you watch a college game, and then go watch Sunday Night Baseball. The strike zone looks very, very similar, and I don't like it. I think if you're going to do that, it needs to be very uniform. If you're going to do that, so I can understand Major League Baseball probably loves it because it gives them a more accurate read on the pitchers that they're scouting to draft. But I haven't enjoyed the strike zone this year at all, and I think it's made for much more offensive baseball, obviously too.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. No, there's no doubt. So, I definitely agree with both of you on that. All right, last comment before we let these guys get out of here. Matt, how much are we loving the pitch clock now that it seems to be managed like we all wanted? I don't have a problem with the pitch clock. I think once we got used to it, I'm fine with it. I think Coog and I both like to pitch quick anyway. When you get in a rhythm, we didn't like to take, Brett Laxton took Coog a minute between each pitch. So
I was watching a game earlier today. I want to say it was Florida, Missouri, if that was a game.
Yeah, they played.
And the Missouri guy threw a pitch. He threw the pitch with 16 seconds. He had first and second with 2 outs. He threw a pitch, but his spikes locked up, so he didn't throw the pitch. They called a pitch delay, and they go back and look at it. There was 14 seconds left on the clock, and he was complaining that he still had 14 seconds to get back on the rubber and throw the pitch. But anyway, I've got no problem with it. I mean, look, it's made the game a better product, especially for TV. I mean, y'all probably know the stats better than I do, but viewership is way up. ESPN Plus app is way up. SEC Network's way up. So, hey, if that's working, I'm all for it.
Moose, what you got on the pitch clock?
It shaved time off the games. I mean, if that's what they wanted to do, it's working. Me, I'll go sit out there watch them play for 4 hours. I'll watch them play for 2.5. I'm gonna be out there watching them play. So, just I love baseball.
Nah, I got you. I'm personally in favor of it. I think it's been a nice addition, and I think once you get used to it, I haven't really noticed that much. The time difference is nice, right? So I'm fine with it. I think if it would have happened while we were playing Coog, it wouldn't have been that big a deal. Look, if I don't have to hold anybody on any longer than I need to, I'm fine with it. So, but all right, that's going to do it. I want to thank everybody who tuned in on the live stream. We hit a new record tonight. Hey, we got, I think, what, 77, 78? That's a new
Good
record
job,
here.
Moose.
Hey, that's y'all. That's Coogan and Musso joining me here. But Coog, I appreciate your time, brother. Thank you very much, man. Always a pleasure spitting some knowledge on the podcast. Thank you, man.
Yes, sir. Thanks for having me.
Musso, you were late, but it came in with some great information. I know you ran straight from the game. So I'll let you tell everybody where to catch you. I did it, but I want you to do it. So, Moose, thank you for your time, and tell everybody where they can catch your stuff.
Yeah, Musso at the Box. Anywhere you get your podcast, Apple, Spotify, Google, it's there. Just search it. Drop a link every day, Monday through Friday on my Twitter. You see the handle right there. Get subscribed. We'll be live. Ready to go tomorrow because we'll go through all 3 games all over again and talk about yet another sweep for the Tigers. They've won 7 in a row, 7 SEC games in a row. Boys are hot a little bit right now.
We'll take that with some potentially pitching staffs right for the taking coming up. So
Yeah.
I can't thank these 2 guys enough. Friends of mine, and I appreciate their time here on a Sunday evening. Got to thank my guy Jackson, my son, helping me out on the backside of things. But look, until next time, everybody, y'all stay safe, and as always, go Tigers.